Hey there, it's Andrea. Today, we talk Miami Vice in space. We debate the Prime Directive again, and we ask the question, did we really need an after-school special for this episode? Stay tuned to find out.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Shereese, today we are talking about Season 1, Episode 21, entitled Symbiosis. This episode was written by Richard Manning and Hans Beimler and directed by Wynn Phelps. The star date is unknown, and I've decided to add a little tidbit, the air date, the original air date of the episode, which was April 18th, 1988. So I love thinking about like what the world was like at that time, like when this episode aired.
Yeah, and I think even just the year is really helpful because the April thing, maybe it was more detail for me, but knowing that it's in the 80s versus like any other time makes a really big difference.
It really does, doesn't it? At least for me, it does. So here's the plot of Symbiosis. I love this episode. The Enterprise attempts to rescue a freighter, which has been disabled by a star's magnetic field and is about to collide with a planet. An agreement is reached to transport over the crew of the freighter, but they surprisingly send over a cargo barrel first. The Enterprise crew attempts to transport the freighter's crew, but is only successful in recovering 4 of them before the ship is destroyed. 2, Tijan and Romus, are scruffy and unshaven, while the other 2, Sobi and Langor, are groomed and well-dressed. They all show relief that the barrel made it over and little remorse for the lost ship and crewmen. Both groups start to fight over the ownership of the mystery cargo.
Ooh, so this is like a nice synopsis where you're not even talking about what it's about yet. I think that's so fun. Do you want to keep that going, or do you want to just spill the beans?
Yeah. No, you know what? Let's
have this one be a mystery episode.
Yeah, yes, because there's just so much. Like there's just so much to unpack like in this episode. Do you have any overarching like thoughts or feelings before we really jump in?
Yeah, I really, really like this episode. This is one of the few episodes of season 1 that I distinctly recall from season 1, where it's like, if I ever, for some reason, am digging back into season 1 to watch episodes, this is one of the episodes that I will actually sit and watch. I think it's really, really interesting. The social like issues brought up in it are completely fascinating. And it's just not dumb. Right? Like a lot of the episodes we've been complaining about in season 1, it's been like, oh my gosh, this is just so dumb. This is dumb and that's dumb and whatever. And like, this just isn't. You're just like, I was just so into the storyline that like, and the acting was great. This is what makes TNG so lovely. I feel like we're really on an upswing now.
Yeah, definitely. This episode for me felt like one that was so good. It could have been placed in season 3 or 4 and like wouldn't have missed a beat. It's so good. It is so good. Okay, so to open the episode right off the bat, we start with the bosun's whistle, which you've only heard once so far on Where No One Has Gone Before, and I love it. And Captain Picard announces that they'll be flying close to a sun that's undergoing these crazy magnetic field changes, so the crew may experience some disruption in their equipment. And when he's doing that, I love that we're hearing his voice, but we're seeing people like do their business in engineering, or in, Dr. Crusher kind of looks up while she's in the middle of like scanning someone and then gets back to her work. And I feel like that's a lovely little snapshot of like what life would be like on the Enterprise, where you have these announcements coming through the PA system, but like, you're still doing your thing.
Yeah, that was really cool because usually we don't get that. We just get a ship-wide announcement and that's the announcement and we keep moving. Like when they go red alert, everything turns red and we keep it moving. Yeah. But to see like what's going on in the rest of the ship as these announcements are happening was really cool. It was like an inner pan, right? Instead of like the ship, this was mixing it up where we're seeing.
Yeah, no, that it's lovely in that. So there's a couple of things I've noticed in these little snapshots of like life on the Enterprise. There are scant uniforms running around, which no surprise because it's still season 1. I think we're going to finally get rid of that in season 2.
I was a little surprised about that actually because I only I remember the scant uniform on the man in maybe Naked Now. Okay. I remember that from season 1 and being like, they put a man in a dress. That's so interesting. But I had no idea that these uniforms were just like running around the ship for episodes and episodes. We're on episode 21 and people are still wearing these outfits. I'm like,
seriously. Seriously, you're so right about that. Like in my previous recollection, I thought they were just in the pilot episode and then they ditched them.
Yeah,
So
or maybe like 3 more episodes.
Yeah.
And never again.
And then never again. But yeah, here they are. They're more background. They're not like as in your face about it, but there they are. And then when we reviewed 11001001, the Binar episode, Picard and Riker have to go to main engineering to like start the auto destruct. And I said that engineering table has chairs. When have they ever had chairs? And you know what? They were actually back. Like when we see the scan uniform, there's somebody sitting at a chair at that engineering dock table. So I was like, oh, I guess they did have chairs a couple of times. It just is not very memorable. So, all right. So we get that cool bosun's whistle announcement. They put the sun, the star that's like undergoing all these changes, on main viewer. And I don't know if you noticed this or if you caught this, but Picard says, let's block out the sun's photosphere because it's like too bright. And they basically take this black circle and just put it over the photosphere of the sun.
They totally drag and drop it.
They totally did. And I was like, I bet for 1988, that seemed really cool. But for like 2020, that's like, man, that's some really shitty like drag and drop work right there. It's like, so it didn't age well. It didn't age well.
This is like the opposite of the crystalline entity, right? Which was like a cool special effect where you're
it
like,
looked cool then, it looks cool now.
Yeah, this is the opposite of that. However, I do like how they showed the what do you call it? Those eruptions that happen on the sun?
Oh, the solar flares.
Yeah, the solar flares were just so pretty.
Yes, and those were solar flares video taken from our own sun.
Of course, because this planet's not
obviously
real.
Yeah, obviously. But well, I mean, it wasn't computer generated. Like it was actually like NASA footage. Yeah, it was space footage, which is cool. Which is cool because I was like, they could have easily have done like some CGI magic,
CGI thing, which could have been amazing and could have been horrible.
Yeah, it could have been the crystalline entity, or it could have been Q's net.
Q's space net.
Okay, so while they're checking out the sun, they spot this small freighter that's in danger, and its orbit is decaying around this planet, so it's going to crash into a planet. Yes, which is a problem.
It's unfortunate.
It's super unfortunate. So the crew seems a little simple, I want to say.
The crew of the freighter. Yes.
So Picard and Riker are like, hey, do you guys need help? Like, what can we do? And they're like, the ship go boom. Like, the problem, we don't know. It's like, and I love the faces of the crew of the Enterprise. What? Like, what is going on? And Picard says, okay, we're going to try to pull you out with a tractor beam. And the captain of the freighter says, that's great. Let's try that. And Picard's like, what? Like, it's just
he's like, if you think that's best. And Picard's like, why, yes, I do think that's best. And he goes, okay.
Yes. And he goes, if you think that's best, and Picard, what he actually says in one moment is, yes, unless you have some other option. And the guy's like, no. It's like, this is not, I think this is actually one of those very real things that you could run into when you're running into like different alien races that don't structure their power the same way or don't communicate the same way. They won't be as like clipped and professional as like Picard might be. And they might just be like, okay, which
what, that's true. That's true. We don't really run into any alien species that are just like dumb. We don't really run into that on TNG now that I think about it. Any species where they're just like totally like nonsensical, like no, where they, because that would be so comical that I don't think it would fit in the dramatic storyline of the show.
Well, there is that one race that kidnaps Geordi. Remember, they like kind of pretend to be stupid, and Geordi's like, I'll beam over and help you, like fix your ship. And they're like, our ship is fast. And he's like, oh, okay, like I'm on my way. And once they have him, then they kidnap him. And they're just smart enough to like kind of rest on their like, we sound dumb, so we can like lure other people.
To use that manipulatively.
Exactly, but they're not actually smart enough to like see that all the way through to the end, because Geordi like very quickly like outsmarts them, and then it's kind of like game set match. That's sort of it.
Interesting.
Yeah, but that's not until later. Okay. Anyway, all right. So the ship begins to disintegrate, and Yar does some like transporter trickery to get the. And
and I'm getting really anxious in those first. Gosh, I feel like it was like 12 minutes, but it was probably like 4. Maybe. But I feel like it was so long of them chit chatting, and I'm like, Enterprise, you see the freighter is crashing. It's about to burn up in the atmosphere and explode. And you're sitting here chit-chatting with the crew on the freighter who don't understand what you're saying to them. So how about you just save their butts, like pull them out? You know, it's like, we could use a tractor. And they're like, hey guys, do you want to use a tractor? Sure, we could use a tractor beam. Okay, let's use a tractor. Just like freaking
just
like,
do it. They're engage.
Engage, right. And then
you
it's
literally have a word for that. Just engage.
Yes. And then they're like, oh, the tractor doesn't work because we're too close to this and the magnetic whatever. They're like, do you guys have any? Okay, you guys, your coil's not working. Can you repair your coil? They are literally about to die. We have like a ticking time clock here. Like all of that was making me so anxious. I was somebody make a effing call.
You know, I so agree with you on that, especially when Yar was already like in the transporter room doing her magic. And she's like, go to your transport pad, engage this. And they're like, let me ask and see if anybody knows how to do that. And then there's like 4 seconds of silence and you're like, come on, right? Because of course, Worf is like, external hull temperature, 10 million degrees. And you're like, oh God, just hurry. But so they managed to beam like goldy, coppery canister barrels. Mm-hmm. And they're like, what the F? Like, where are the people? So then, you know, Riker quickly says, like, beam that to like a cargo room. And then let's just get these people. So there are 6 crew members. 2 of them don't make it. And
miraculously, 4 of them do. Through this crazy energy storm and magnetic whatever, they managed to get through. And Yar's just like, if you would have just beamed yourselves instead of your cargo wasting precious time, we could have saved everybody. But it seems like Yar's the only one who cares about that.
I feel like the Enterprise is the only one who cares, and they care very briefly, where they're like, man, nobody seems upset about the fact that you guys lost 2 crew members, but they're also not that upset that 2 crew members are, which I guess it's hard to be upset about somebody you don't know. The 4 come aboard. 2 of them are like very well dressed, and 2 of them are like ragtag looking, and they're speaking really disheveled, and they have like that very basic language. And so the 2, Tajan and Romus, are like, did our cargo make it? And Riker's like, yes, but we couldn't find like the pattern to lock onto the other 2 crew members. And they're like, but the cargo made it, right? It's like, how are you guys not upset that you lost 2 lives for literally no reason?
That's what everyone's wondering. And that's what gets revealed later. Why you're not upset? Why nobody cares that those 2 people died?
Yeah. Literally nobody cares. Mm-hmm. So they want to see the cargo immediately. And it becomes very quickly apparent that the well-dressed and the not well-dressed groups kind of have a little beef with each other. And they start arguing about who the cargo actually belongs to. And we see this really cool effect where they attack each other using like internally generated electricity. Which was super cool. And I love so cool. I love that Tasha has to like shoot one of them with a phaser, and she's like, behave. Zap! Yeah,
she goes, behave yourselves, gentlemen. Yeah. It's just like, okay. A little dominatrix Yar coming out there.
It totally was.
That was like, you know, that sums up like the faces that Riker and Yar made when they saw them like electrifying each other.
Yeah.
The faces they were making the whole episode up to this point where they were just like, who are these people? Who are these people? And they started electrocuting each other. And it's like, what do we do? And then Yar, you know, faithful Yar shoots somebody. That's her job. So she shoots somebody, and then they're like, all right, we're good. You
know, Yar would make an excellent police officer in this day and age. She just shoots first, asks questions later, and then has 0 repercussions for killing people.
She would make a great American, just in general. Because I think that's how we roll. Yep. You know, we're just like, danger, scary, kill it. Oh, wait, who was that?
Yes.
I thought it was a burglar. I guess it was my friend coming in the door.
An innocent person? Yeah. Okay, we'll put you on administrative leave so you can go on vacation with your family while we deal with this mess. Anyway, so there is this great hallway scene where Yar and Riker are walking out of the cargo hold once they sort of like cool the situation down. And they're walking sort of back to a turbo lift to get to the bridge, I assume. And Riker and Yar are having this back and forth about like, have you ever seen an alien race that generates electricity? No. What do we do with it? Can we disarm them? How do we keep them from creating a ruckus like on the ship? Like these are all very valid questions that you would have to ask as like chief of security. I thought, you know, Yar is finally becoming like useful other than just being like a gun.
I felt the same way. And this kind of piggybacks off of our last episode review where Yar has this really brilliant idea before they go down to the planet where she's saying, okay, let's take a small contingency to the planet for this and that reason. And I was like, yeah, way to do your job. And then here again, she's saying, well, this is going to be a challenge. And she's asking these really thoughtful questions. And again, I was like, all right, Yar, you're really stepping into that role of being super functional as chief of security, which is ironic because not too much later than this, the character Yar will no longer be on the show. So it's like she's finally stepping up and like doing something that I feel like is really appropriate for her role, not just jumping out and shooting things. And then she stops. So whatever, we'll enjoy it while it's here.
At this point, Troy is actually being really helpful. She points out something that we notice. None of the aliens seem upset about the loss of the 2 crew members, but she does also say, like, the cargo barrel is a tremendous source of anxiety for them.
Mm-hmm.
And we see them fighting over it, but we don't really know that, like, they're super duper anxious about it or why. And so, Troy, thank you for being helpful.
Thanks, Troy.
Thanks so much. So we find out that the cargo is medicine called Felicium, and it's the only cure for a deadly plague on one of the 2 worlds. Bum, bum, bum. I mean, that in itself was like, this is why they're fighting so fiercely about who owns the cargo. Because one group is saying, we paid for it fair and square, so it's ours. And the more well-dressed, they're called the Breckians. The Breckians are like, well, your payment blew up with the ship, so you haven't actually paid, so it's ours. And I don't know, what would you do, Shereese, if you were in that situation? If you had realized this is medicine, and the Onarans, the like simpler people, need this to cure a plague, and the Breckians don't want to give it up, what do you think? What would you do?
What would I do being a member of Starfleet is what you're asking.
Yes.
Because we've got like we've got 3 sides of this die here,
totally.
I guess.
Totally.
It's a really challenging situation. And I like how Picard was really careful and diplomatic in his treatment of the situation, because he was really honoring the Prime Directive. And like, how do we, we're trying to save lives. That's why we beamed you guys off the ship before it exploded. But how do we not interfere in your cultural customs and your relationship with one another as neighboring planets, right? Like, it's not my job to get involved with your conflicts. I just want to save your lives and kind of send you home. Yeah. So it's a really difficult position to be in. I'm not sure what exactly I would do. Beverly is obviously the voice of kind of, I think, the audience in this. She's the voice of like, no, this is right and this is wrong and da-da-da-da. And in this like rare moment, we have a rare moment for season 1, we have Picard saying, no, we can't push our beliefs on other people, which I appreciate, because that's what makes Picard like so lovely, such a wonderful leader moving through all the rest of the seasons. However, so far in season 1, it's just been like every other culture they encounter are dumb and backwards and primitive unless they conform to Starfleet's way. Yes. Right? That's been like so many episodes of season 1 has been that like our way or the highway. And so I actually appreciated that this wasn't such a clear cut and dry our way or the highway. And they actually had a conversation about it. Like, how do we approach other cultures?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a fair discussion to have. However, at this point in the episode, we find out later on that the Felicium is not what it seems. But at this point in the episode, I'm like, if it's medicine that cures a deadly plague, I'm sorry, we can't be party to like mass death because we didn't act to like save these people. You guys can figure out payment some other way, but people shouldn't be dying for it. Like, that's what I think would make me not good Starfleet, because I'd be all about like, no, we're giving the medicine to like the people who are dying, period. Like, I don't care about beliefs.
Right. And so that's the challenge, is because it's not Picard's medicine to give. So it's like you coming into a conflict with 2 adults. Like, you walk into a room, 2 adults are fighting over an object, right? And they are both claiming to own that object. And you come in and say, I'm going to take that object, give it from person A and give it to person B. And that's how it's going to be. And it's like, you're not their mom. Like, you're totally, you're a third party. You're a peer. You're not their parent. You're not in charge of them. You have no, so it's like, that's like, that'd be totally like not cool. Right.
I really align with Dr. Crusher, where I'm like, people are dying, right? Like, I'm all about like, who cares? But you're right. Like, we're not, the whole point of the Federation is not to be the intergalactic police, even though they totally are. But that's not the point. So, but here's something interesting. When Picard, when the Onarans mention that all of them carry the plague from birth,
right?
And this medicine, the Felicium, is the only thing that keeps their symptoms at bay, Picard very intelligently assumes that if they are born with the plague, they must have brought it on board. They could have brought it on board the ship. So that was smart, because he's like, oh, we need to do medical scans to make sure that you didn't infect the whole ship. Thank God they didn't go with the virus subplot. Thank
you know what?
God.
I actually thought, I actually thought they were going to start with a computer virus at the beginning of the episode because I wasn't sure which one this was when I started watching it.
Oh, and with the distortion.
Right, with all the electrical distortions of the computer, I was like, oh, here we go. Yeah. There's going to be some other computer virus that messes up the systems and it affects another system. And I was like, oh, okay. And then when I saw the aliens, I was like, oh, it's this one. Okay, I like this one.
Yes.
So there was 2 points here where this could have gone terribly, terribly wrong and turned into another virus episode.
Yes. And you know what? They navigated those waters beautifully because I'm like, thank God you guys didn't go with like a computer virus because of the distortion or now like the plague virus subplot. Like, I'm so glad they didn't go with that. So there's a couple of dynamics like happening here. The Brekkians are the fancier aliens, let's call them. They don't carry the plague. The Onarans are suffering, the 2 Onarans, T'Jon and the other dude, are suffering these symptoms and they're starting to go into like, they're hurting. And so Picard goes to speak to the Brekkians to convince them to like, can we just give 2 doses so that they can feel better and kind of get through these negotiations? Which Picard basically walks in on these 2 asshole Brekkians like toasting that they are like going to make a shit ton of money or whatever. And it's like, you guys are like the worst people. You're just basically like war profiteers, kind of like the planet from last week's episode. Yeah, Minos. Thank you. So it's like you're just profiteering off of like the suffering of others, and that like it's just they're so unlikable. And the woman in particular is just so smug and snide. Like, I just want to wipe that smirk off her face. She is just the worst. She's the worst. But Picard goes in. He's like, "Hey, can we do these 2 doses?" And they're like, "Okay." And then this is kind of where the other shoe drops, right? Like they get the 2 doses and they immediately start feeling better. And Dr. Crusher, thank God she is on duty and on
Crusher
it.
to the rescue yet again.
Again, the Crushers are crushing it again. This is one that has Wesley. Last week didn't have Wesley. This one has Wesley, but he's like
in his rainbow sweater.
In his magical rainbow sweater. But Dr. Crusher is on it and she's like, look, I don't know anything about this plague. I don't know anything about this Felicium. But I do know a drug addict when I see one. And no drug makes you feel like instantly high.
Like no medicine
No
would.
medicine makes you feel
but
instantly
a narcotic
high.
Absolutely would.
Exactly. And I thought this was really interesting because they're using a word narcotic in the 24th century, which we know, in the 80s. But yeah, I was like, oh, that's like super clever. And as I did a little research, I found out that this episode was written by the executive producer, Maurice Hurley, after he had worked on writing episodes for Miami Vice, which is all about drug trade. So he wanted to do like a drug trade in space. Yeah.
Put anything in space and it becomes infinitely more interesting, in my opinion.
Yes.
Also, I want to point this out because this is like a running theme for me. I am obsessed with the names in this episode. They are so cool, like T'Jon and like all of it, like the Brekkians or whatever.
Sobi and Langor, the Brekkians. Sobi is the man, and Langor is the woman. And then T'Jon is like the blonde captain of the ship, and then Romus is the brown-haired guy. But yeah, they are so cool. Those names are great, like Sobi and Langor. It's not just like Joshua or something where it's like a real name with like a guttural sound.
These names, alien names, are super hard, and they always match it to the feel of the planet. If it's like a rough planet, they have a lot of hard K sounds, and if it's like a sweet planet, they have these like it's very cool. It's very cool. Anyways, so she's like, Crusher to the rescue, and she's like, I recognize a narcotic when I see it. This is not medicine. These are drugs. And then Picard's like, wait, so you're saying that the entire planet, she's like, yes, are drug addicts. All of them are drug addicts, but they don't know that they're drug addicts. And then it's like, ooh, this is really awkward now because, Crusher wants to come in and be like, here, take this synthetic thing and it's going to ease your withdrawal symptoms and everybody will not be a drug addict because it's not good to be a drug addict. Picard's just like, wait a minute. Like there's a whole
prime directive.
Right. There's a whole bigger picture here than just a drug addict who wants to be, by the way, let's mention that, who wants to be in recovery. They don't even know they're addicts.
Yeah.
But for an addict to really recover, they need to choose to recover. And she's making that choice for them. And then he's like, wait a minute, this is like, there's a relationship between these 2 cultures. Like there's a lot more going on than just us coming in and saving the day. And this is something that we actually, a term that I've heard coined in the Christian world is that when missionaries will go to different developing nations and offer support, there's this phrase called the Great White Hope, where it's like these, white Westerners come along and they drop a bunch of money or they build wells or whatever, and then they leave. But they don't teach anybody how to repair the wells.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, oh my gosh, we've got water, until the wells break and no one knows how to fix the well. And now they're back where they were before they started.
Yeah.
And now the Great White Hope is gone. And so we need, like, instead of just, like giving a man fish, it's like teaching men to fish.
Yes.
And anyways, just that idea of like, I'm going to come in and save the day. And you actually don't think about all those bigger issues.
Yeah.
And you cause more damage than good. I feel like that's what was going on. That's what came through my mind, is Beverly's just like, this is wrong. We need to come in and fix it. And Picard's like, whoa, wait a minute. There's more stuff going on than just this one thing.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of layers to this episode that all kind of drop at once. As soon as Dr. Crusher realizes that the Felicium is a powerful narcotic, we start getting all this background information. And very conveniently, Data's like, hey, I found a whole bunch of stuff in the database.
Which he didn't find like 10 minutes ago when they had asked him when the trader was crashing. But whatever,
and also he's a computer, so he should be able to access it like instantaneously. But whatever. Data's allowed to have a slow day. But, even technology has hiccups sometimes. But this is what we basically find out right off the bat. On Breccia and Onara, they had this like kind of
deadly
trade
plague
going. Yeah, they had this trade going between them, and they had this deadly plague on Breccia and Onara. And Breccians basically realized like this Felicium was a plant that they could use as medicine. But if you continue to distill it and distill it and distill it and make it more and more pure, it basically becomes like cocaine or speed or whatever. And then now you become completely and hopelessly addicted to it from birth, right? So the Breccians were able to very quickly realize the plague has been wiped out, we're over it, and now we don't want to become hooked on this plant. But they very conveniently did not mention that to the Onarans. And so they created a trade for like an equitable kind of way of life. Mm-hmm. So the Breccians don't know how to do anything at all. They don't know how to do fuck all except make this drug. Mm-hmm. And in exchange, the Breccians are like, since you are willing to give us the means to live, to have life, we will make everything and do everything for you. So the Breccians don't know how to do anything. And the Onarans, which is kind of weird. This was like,
or you mean the Onarans don't know how to do anything?
No. The Breccians don't know how to do anything. Remember, the Onarans are the ones who like provide them with like goods and services and all this stuff in exchange for the drug, which they think is medicine. Mm-hmm. And the Breccians, like, it's their only industry is just distilling this plant down to like a powerful narcotic. So it's really gnarly because this is like it's not a symbiotic way of life. It's like a parasitic way of life.
Right.
And I feel bad because the Onarans like had no idea. Like, I wish somebody would have just said like, here's what we found out. You guys are drug addicts. It's not your fault. You didn't know. But now that you have that information, you can choose a path that works for your world. Like, keep using the drug if you want or don't. But at least you like are aware of what you're doing.
Right, which would also break the Prime Directive, even sharing that information, because that's how they've maintained this trade. So originally, like 2,000 years ago or whatever, the Onarans were technologically advanced, much more so than the Breccians.
Yes.
And so the one thing that they had was this Felicium plant, which only grew on their planet. So they had to depend on them for that plant in order to survive. Had the Breccians not made it more and more potent, it probably just would have been a mild narcotic. People would have all, they would have just far surpassed the other planet in their technological advances.
Yes.
But because they turned them into dependent drug addicts and they became drug dealers, now we've got this situation where even though they're supplying them with goods and services, like, they're probably not that great, because look at how crappy their ship is. I mean, how good drug addicts can only do but so much, even if they're high functioning drug addicts, because they created the Felicium to wear off after 72 hours.
So you're just constantly dependent.
You're constantly dependent. And that takes up all of your focus and all of your energy and all of your time, and everything else you're doing and creating is just to get more Felicium. So if this was like a real world scenario, I'm like, they wouldn't be able to supply anybody with anything.
No.
They'd be just like looking for their next fix.
Exactly.
Especially 72 hours. Like, that is like a quick turnaround.
That's pretty short. Yeah. So, well, then once we realize that like it's a drug, we have this very awkward Wesley Crusher moment where he's like, why do people want to do drugs? It's very after school special. Special where Tasha's like, well, people do drugs because they feel good. But then after a while, like, you're just trying to get to baseline. Like, you're just trying to get to your next fix. And Will Wheaton, bless your heart. He was doing the like child puzzled face where he's like, I don't understand. Why would people want to do drugs? And I'm like, oh man, which broke my heart in real world, because he was, as we've talked about before, he was in Stand By Me with River Phoenix, who died of a drug overdose. And being a child star and like palling around with all those child stars, like you're very well aware of like drug use. Even if like, I don't know if Will Wheaton ever got into doing it himself or not. And I'm not here to judge if he did, but as a child actor, you're totally aware of like who's using and how, you know, it's just that was really sad because Will Wheaton wasn't that innocent, but Wesley Crusher was like, drug use? Why?
Yeah.
How? You know, it's like,
and this scene, we actually referenced this scene, I believe, in our welcome episode of this podcast, because this relationship that they're trying to create between Yar and Wesley, this like big sister, little brother thing, was actually written into the TNG Bible, which is something that the creator of this show, Gene Roddenberry, made as the writer's guide for like who these characters are and what they stand for. And one thing that was written into Yar's character was that she kind of had this I don't want to say misfit youth because it seems like she did something wrong, but she grew up in this horrible planet full of rape gangs and all this crazy stuff. And she like managed to survive and fight her way out of that planet. So she didn't really get to have a childhood. She didn't get to have fun. And, you know, like everything basically that Wesley Crusher is doing and is living is what Yar wishes her childhood was like.
Yes.
So when she's, and this is in the TNG Bible, this is not apparent in the show, but when she sees Wesley, she just sees like her youth, her innocence, what could have been. And she wants to promote him and support him, encourage him and keep him on the straight and narrow, which obviously he's going to, because he's such a like nice boy. But this scene was supposed to be kind of starting to build that relationship. And you and I talked about before how Geordi and Data's relationship was also foretold in the TNG Bible. Yeah. And you don't see it a ton in season 1. You see like little glimpses. But by the time you get to season 7, you're just like, oh yeah, they're totally best friends. Like you can't imagine one without the other. Yeah. That was supposed to be the intention for Yar and Wesley, was that by the end of it, you'd see this big sister, little brother thing. That's just like really beautiful. So that's another thing we would have seen had this character continued on the show, but she doesn't. So anyways, this scene was going to have a purpose seasons from now.
Right. Well, I mean, I wish we could have seen more of Yar develop into this like much more multifaceted character. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But I really could do without the like buddy with Wesley. Like it's just, there's too much of an age gap. It's too much of like you come from different worlds kind of thing. Like
it's a little weird.
It is a little weird. Like I can see Data and Geordi because even though Data's an android, like they're same age roughly, they're kind of the same ranks. They sort of are constantly like mixing in the same circles. But Wesley only interacts.
Wesley and Yar, why would they be hanging out?
Exactly. Why would you be hanging out? It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, so we have this after school special. And it was basically, it ended up becoming like one of those rainbow, like the more you know, like type of moments. And I was like, I could have totally done without that. So I'm good. Thank you guys. Let's keep it moving. But anyway, all right. So now we know that it's a drug. The Breckians all of a sudden are like, you know, we thought about it. We don't want any suffering on this planet. They can pay us anyway later, and we'll allow them to have the Felicium. And Picard and Crusher have this like super awkward back and forth. Did you notice this? Where Picard is like, the other shoe has dropped. And Beverly's like, what shoe? How do they know? Oh, they know that it's a drug and not a medicine. And they only would have known that. Like they're having this like aside right in front of them. And it was so tacky. I hated it. I hated it so much. Like it was just, it made my skin crawl a little bit. And I thought that there could have been a much better way to write that. Like, oh, you guys do know that it's a drug. Okay, so you are complete scumbags. Okay. You know, but instead it was like, how would they know? They'd only know if they was on their planet too. And then they must have, it's like, stop talking amongst yourselves, right? Like the Breckians are like, we can hear you. You're literally a foot in front of us.
Yeah, it's like the Sherlock Holmes moment, right? That's how Sherlock Holmes always does it, where he's like, well, of course, it was this. Why do you think it was that? And they kind of like reveal it. So I think that was more for the audience's benefit. But yeah, it could have been done more simply. However, I will say it was effective. It got the point across. We were just like, hey, you guys know it's not a medicine.
Yeah, and you guys are scumbags.
And they're just like, so are you going to tell them? Because you could, like now that you figured out our big secret. And then Picard's just like, no, I can't tell them. And then the evil woman is just like, yes, it's none of your business. And has this like, little smirk. And you're just like, you're lucky. And you just want to be like, you know, he could tell them right now, right? Like, even though he just told you, yes,
like, don't
it's
push
policy.
it.
Yeah. You have a little smirk. He could be like, you know what? Beep. hey, where are the Anarans? Like, he could just tell him right then. You haven't escaped anything.
Don't overplay your hand.
Yes.
That woman is such a bitch. God, she's just the worst. And I don't know if it's that the writers wrote her to be more grating because she's female, because, you know, society kind of tends to look like less favorably on females than males, unfortunately. And so if you have a bad guy, it's like even more like hateable if they're female, because some stupid gender role basically says that like we're just supposed to be like lovely and empathetic all the time, and instead it's like, how could you not be empathetic? Like, you're the worst. Like, that other guy is just as bad, but she was somehow more hateable. Anyway, so Picard is like, nope, I can't tell them because the Prime Directive precludes me. Is that the right word? The Prime Directive basically bars me from being able to say anything. But then here's my problem. In the final scene, the Breckians and the Onarans are preparing to beam down to Onara, and Picard allows the Onarans to take the Felicium, even though he knows it's a drug, but he does not allow them to take the coils to repair the ships.
Right.
So knowing that the trade, because the Onarans only have 2 ships, so the trade between the Onarans and the Breckians is going to be disrupted. The flow of Felicium is about to end. The whole planet's about to go into like massive withdrawals, and everybody's eventually the planet will start to rebuild itself. But I thought, okay, it was a just ending. But by disrupting the trade between these planets and disrupting their relationship, you completely fucking threw the Prime Directive out the window.
But see, I disagree there, because had the Enterprise not come along and saved the freighter, the exact same thing would have happened. The freighter would have been destroyed. The Felicium would have been destroyed. They would have taken their last 2 ships. Like, they would have never gotten these coils anyways. I feel like he didn't disrupt anything. He just kind of he literally left it as it was, because by giving the coils, now he'd be changing things, right? I mean, saving their lives, technically he did change things, but they break the Prime Directive to keep people from blowing up. They do that all the time.
Yeah.
But that would have still happened. Like, had the Enterprise not come along, the ship would have been destroyed. They wouldn't have gotten any new coils. They wouldn't have gotten any new trade. They would have, eventually those 2 derelict ships would have stopped, and they would have still been in the same position.
Oh, you're
so
right.
I feel like he didn't do anything wrong. He just decided to not help enable them. That's what he chose to do. And the evil guy had that complaint, right, where he was like, you just, you can't interfere, yada yada yada. Like first he was like, they were like, she was like, yeah, it's none of your business, like what we do. But then when he said, no, you're not taking the coils, like, you will have to figure it out on your own. You will have to repair your own ship. You'll have to figure that out on your own. And then the evil, Bracken was just like, well, that's not fair. That's not right. Like, you have to help. And then he said, well, you didn't have a problem with me holding the Prime Directive when it was in your favor.
Yeah.
Now that I'm holding the Prime Directive and it's not in your favor, now you don't like it. But you know what? The Prime Directive is the Prime Directive, and this is what it is. So I feel like he just chose to stay neutral with both ways. And he said, too, to Beverly, like, the second they agreed to give the Felicium, my hands were tied. I couldn't say or do anything because that was they traded, like, they wanted to trade.
Yeah.
I have no right to interfere in their trade. So by not giving them the coils, I am choosing to not interfere in their trade. Their trade will continue as it would have if we hadn't come along, or will not continue.
That's a really good point, because I saw it as, you are disrupting their trade. Everything's about to be thrown into flux because of a decision that you're making. But I could really see, though, that was going to happen anyway. I always feel like I always have these really strong opinions, and then somebody's like, oh, but this one thing. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So I don't know how strong those opinions actually are. Maybe my convictions aren't worth jack shit. I don't know. But but I could see that. I do think, though, if you know that this planet is going to go into these massive withdrawals, one of the things that Dr. Crusher says is we can give them some sort of synthesized stuff that basically like eases their withdrawal pain, so that the entire planet can kind of like move on, but without like being in this like horrible, God knows how many months of like turmoil that's going to be, or weeks or whatever. I don't really know very much about drug addiction because I've always kind of stayed away from that sort of world, but you're about to throw this entire planet into turmoil. Like, you couldn't do anything to ease their suffering. Like, that seems heartless. Like, you could say, like, hey, we've got this like short-term stuff that you could take, and then that would just kind of ease them off the drug addiction.
But then it would also be like, hey, we're not going to give you coils, but we're going to give you some synthetic Felicium. Like, that would not be like, the Breckons would not be okay with that either.
It wouldn't work. But I also see, though, like, Dr. Crusher's desire to
help.
To help, because they don't have to go through these terrible pains and withdrawals. Right. It's like I had to have an emergency root canal recently, which was like super traumatizing. But, if they say like, well, we have this anesthetic, so it would help you or not, I'm like, no, give me the anesthetic, because I'm not doing a root canal like without anesthesia. There's no way.
Yeah. Right? The only difference in that metaphor is that you're like, I need a root canal because I have a very painful infection. And oh, look, I have the choice to get anesthetic or not. Yeah. Versus this scenario where the drug addicts don't know they're drug addicts. Yeah. They think they're dying from a plague, and the drug dealers are telling them that this is medicine. So their anxiety is not from getting a fix. I mean, it's from getting a fix physiologically, but even Picard said it. He said it's psychological. Like they literally think this is their only way to survive. And you'd be making the choice for them. You'd be like, with the knowledge I have, I'm going to fix this for you. Yeah. And I honestly think like, because they don't even know they're drug addicts, they don't even know that they're going to go through withdrawal. Like there's a lot of stuff that they just don't know. Yeah. That they need to be educated on that they probably wouldn't believe, because for hundreds of years, this is challenging their belief, their fundamental belief system that's been in place for hundreds of years. Yeah,
that they think they need it to survive, which is...
Yeah, and so I honestly think that the withdrawal pains, which could last for days of just, agony and all of that, is how they're going to learn, right? When they come out, because they're going to be convinced that they're literally dying because they've been told their whole lives that you're going to die if you don't have this thing. So they will think that they're going to die, and then they'll live. And then they'll start asking the questions, wait a minute, what's going on?
Yes. See, I would just so love to go back and do like a Where Are They Now of Breccia and Onara.
Because once Onarans realize what's up, they're not going to be too happy with Breccia, and Breccia is not going to get any more goods and services. And then Onara is going to rebound with their technology pretty fast. Uh-oh.
Yeah. Now the Breccians, who were just, maybe they're going to have a come to Jesus moment where it's like, maybe we shouldn't have been complete dicks for hundreds of years.
Yeah. And now they're going to be like, shoot, now we need to reroute our industry to do something else to take care of ourselves.
Because that planet, I imagine if we were to predict, Onara is going to rebound technologically very quickly once they're not drug addicts. And Breccia is going to fall into complete disrepair, and they're going to basically... They're going to basically have like a Stone Age all over again, where they're going to have to start all over again and learn how to like build their. So both
and potentially a war. Both plans will have to rebuild and will have to be rebuilt, and potentially a war between the two, of like
right. Yeah, well, because if you think about it, once the Breccians or once the Onarans like are back on their feet and not depend on this drug, they'll be able to
do whatever they want,
build their spaceships, and then they'll be able to just like take over Onara.
And Onara will have no defense. Breccia will have no defenses because they don't have any skills in anything other than this one thing. So it's very Where Are They Now would be so fascinating. I would totally watch that episode.
Right. Well, I'm going to throw this out to our listeners. If you have a fanfic version of like what's going to happen once the Enterprise leaves, like 2 days later, 2 months later, 10 years later, or whatever. I want to know what you think, because I feel like this is one, like there's so much meat on this bone, Shereese. Like we've been talking for almost an hour and I still have so many thoughts that I could share.
Yeah. So all that to say is I think this episode ages really well.
It does.
Like it's fascinating. And I think the beauty of it is that it talks about human nature, right? Even though we're talking about here like legit drug addiction and drug dealers, we all have addictions. Sometimes they're addictions to good, healthy things. And sometimes they're addictions to destructive things, and sometimes they're addictions to neutral things. Yeah. But we all have those things that we like kind of get that fix for, and we kind of look to change our mood, change our attitude, whatever. And so I feel like this just really, it really stands the test of time.
I agree. I think this is one of those like really wonderful episodes that just ages so nicely, Too Short a Season and Code of Honor. It's just, it ages like milk, it just doesn't come out looking good.
Yeah. Those were just trash.
It's just garbage episodes, but this one is such a good one. Like I really do give this one like an A+. Like I really do. This is a fabulous episode. It has everything that you want. It's got human nature. It's got Prime Directive. It's got all that kind of stuff. And you've got Dr. Crusher riding her Huffy around, like being on the high road, which I love. I love when she gets on her Huffy bike and rides around, because she's in a huff and she wants you to know about it. I love it.
And they're like big questions. It's like, who could possibly disagree with Crusher, right? Like, it's just like, of course you would step in. Of course you do need to help. Of course, Yes. But then you have Picard playing that other side of being like, but wait, you can't just step in and decide how people are going to live and then just go ahead and fly away. Like, what the heck? you can't do that either. And you're just like, yes, we've imposed our will on you. And now we're going about our missions. Good luck, everybody. Yeah, like you can't do that either. And it's kind of like, okay. So I really like that too, that they're giving you something to like chew on intellectually.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's like a moral of the story at the end, but not, it's just more for like the audience to kind of chew on instead of like specifically about the characters that are going through this like in that moment. Mm-hmm. Anyway, this episode is wonderful. If there's any that you like miss in season 1, we certainly wouldn't hate you over it, but like definitely check out Symbiosis. This is such a great episode. And I noticed that like with these episodes that we love and have a lot of like good stuff to talk about, I'm a lot less smartassy and sarcastic because I don't have a whole lot to like rip apart, right? But it's just like, no, this episode just rocks. Like it's great. Okay, but then I feel like we've hit a high point because next week we're talking about season 1, episode 22, Skin of Evil. And that is like bottom of the barrel, right?
Bottom of the tar-filled barrel. I actually don't remember this episode. All I remember is that I hated it. So when I rewatch it, I'll see if that's still true, which I have a feeling it will be.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening and for watching with us. We love it. Oh, as an aside, we got like an alert that like our podcast is being listened to literally on every continent on the planet. So like we could not thank you guys enough for just checking out our little like dog and pony show, our teeny tiny little like Star Trek recap show. We love it. And we love you guys so much for listening. Yeah. And like it just made our whole like month. So
it really did. Yeah. Thanks everybody for listening in. We love it.
All right. We'll see you guys next week for Skin of Evil. Bye everybody.
Bye. Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.